Huntington welcomes you to Dreaming with Designers, featuring lighting designer Adam Honoré in conversation with Regine Vital, Manager of Curriculum and Instruction. All events at the Huntington include a land acknowledgement. The Huntington acknowledges that our physical spaces stand on the occupied homeland of the Massachusetts people. We begin by acknowledging the Massachusetts tribe, from whom the colony, province, and Commonwealth of Massachusetts have taken their name. We pay respect to the ancestral bloodline of the Massachusetts tribe and their descendants who still inhabit the land to this day. We honor and respect the many Native peoples who are connected to this land, past, present, and future, including the Nipmuc and Wampanoag peoples. And now, Dreaming with Designers.
Well, hello, Adam. I'm Regine. I'm the Manager of Curriculum and Instruction at the Huntington, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today about the Huntington's production of the Bluest Eye. And I'm really excited to hear about your experience of the process and about some of the design that you did for the show. So I guess we'll just jump right in. We'll get started. First off, it took 2 years for this production to happen, for all the reasons the world knows why. And I'm wondering, how does it feel to finally be in this moment where we can share this production and this story with the greater Boston community, and actually beyond, because eventually in a couple of weeks, we'll have a digital option that can be viewed by people from the comfort of their homes.
Yeah, it feels wonderful just to finally share this story with the Boston audience, because as you said, it was 2 years in the making, and two, it's been a kind of wild ride, because we had originally had this programmed for the 2020 season, and unfortunately it was pulled right at the beginning of coronavirus, unfortunately. And we were actually pretty deep into the design process of that first iteration of the show, which was at the Huntington Avenue Theater. So
Right.
in the long ago, as we talk about it, the show kind of existed in a different form. And it's amazing that when we went to revisit the show to bring it to the new space and kind of see what it feels like to read it in a post-2020 kind of world we're in right now, we actually reinvented and restarted the design process all over again. So the production that you've seen recently is not the production that we originally produced, if you will, 2 years ago. And so much of that is just the wokeness that came with 2020. It
Right.
felt like the audiences kind of need the show now more than ever, even though they probably really needed it 2 years ago, but now they're tuning in and tapping in and listening to what it has to say. And we found that the presentation, and you can stop me if I keep going too long.
Oh, no, please keep, this is awesome.
The presentation of the original one was proscenium style. It was very much traditional theater. We were going to have a very lights up, lights down, change the scenery approach to it. And in this new era of doing theater, Awoye, the director, and I, we talked about how much we didn't want it to feel like the Huntington's just presenting a play. We wanted to feel like this play was almost presenting the Huntington in a kind of fun, exciting way. Like this play was bigger than the theater that we were sitting in. And that's kind of what led us into doing the show in the round and kind of forcing the space to exist in a very non-traditional manner.
Yeah, I love that. And actually in that answer, you sort of anticipated two questions that I have, and I'll go first with this idea of this play is presenting the Huntington. And I say this because, I mean, The Bluest Eye, it is a seminal piece of work in literature, right? It's Toni Morrison's first novel. It begins the trajectory of this prolific, incredible career for Morrison as a novelist. And so this piece means a lot, just kind of culturally, like big capital L literature and capital like A art.
Yes.
But it's also personally quite important to a lot of people. So it sounds like that maybe that was considered in rethinking this second time around how to present this piece and how to present it at this theater. And so I'm wondering, did you feel any additional responsibility, not just coming out of the pandemic and rethinking how to do this? I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but you know what I mean? But also this particular story, for the people who are coming to see it, did you feel any additional responsibility on this project and how to deal with it? and also, like you said, coming out of the wokeness. I mean, the novel is currently being banned in states and municipalities in this country,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
so all of that coming together in this moment, did you feel that extra weight in coming at this project?
Oh my goodness. Well, when we were first approached about doing it the first time in 2019, we were coming up on the 50th anniversary of the novel. So it was already on a lot of people's minds because it was the anniversary of this piece that was still relevant today or in 2019 as it was 50 years prior. And it felt like you have to do the novel justice in a little bit of a way, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to really make the words on the page feel strong on the stage and kind of give respect to the piece. And Lydia Diamond, who did the adaptation, I think, last night I was talking to a costume designer and we were talking about how it's very fascinating in this production and this adaptation to hear the words that are truly Tony and the words that are truly Lydia come out of each character, and you can sit there and you can hear them interweave and dance around each other, and it happens in such a way that it feels like a higher form of art than just your regular kitchen sink play. And that's something that we really took into account for the I'm going to call it the remount at this point, the redesign, is how do we give it the justice of taking it to the next level and elevating it to that higher level of thought and giving the audience something that's just beyond a regular presentation. And how do we have that feeling of going home and thinking about this play 2 weeks from now, a month from now, a year from now, right? So we wanted to have that kind of visceral feeling that you can feel in your soul, and a lot of that went into the design aspects of the show. I feel like I graduated from the answer, but that's kind of where we came from. That's where the roots of this production came from.
Yeah, no, that was great. And it leads me to the next thing that I want to ask about, because you mentioned having a design before and then meeting again with the YA, and I'm assuming also talking with the set designer Jason. Oh, please, I don't want to ruin your name, Jason Artizone West. Did
That's
I say that?
perfect. You said it perfect.
Amazing. And I'm wondering, and you've given us some insight what those conversations were about, and it actually sounds like the vision for the redesign, for the remount, was actually quite clear, especially once you're in a different space and going at it from a completely different direction by doing theater in the round. And what was it like to collaborate with them? And obviously not just with the Woya and with Jason, but also with, you mentioned speaking to the costume designer. There's movement and some dance in this piece. There's music and there's singing in this piece. So just that design coming together overall, how did that coalesce? Were there bumps? Were there moments when you felt like my lighting wants to be this, but I don't know? Like, how did that come together?
Well, starting from the beginning, this piece, we put so much more time and energy into the research aspect of it, the dramaturgy. I would say we put, I'd say 3 times more than the average show, just because we had so many themes happening in this piece that we really wanted to take care of and kind of shed a light on in a way that felt very respectful to all the characters on stage and the performers who were performing that part. Because I think first and foremost, the entire design process was really about taking care of the performers in a way that was not dangerous to their health, because they have to go on stage 8 times a week and perform some pretty serious material. So we really wanted to make sure we did our homework, and that when we presented things to the performers in the group, they felt very supported, and that everything was coming from a kind of fact-based place of dramaturgy. So when we get on stage and we do some of these harder movements and harder segments with heightened language, they would feel like they are the most safe, they feel like they are the most supported, and that the audience is let in on something that's very I don't want, comfortable is not the right word, but it's like there's a good safety net that is also an opportunity for everyone to feel uncomfortable at the same time, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
there's in the novel and in this production that we ask the audience to feel uncomfortable with the people on stage. So we spent a lot of time reading the novel, going through articles and interviews with Toni Morrison and what she went through writing this piece and what her personal life was like when she was writing this piece. And then what was different this go round than the first go round is we created a very firm kind of dramaturgical packet that had design and aesthetics spelled out within it. And it's like a 8 to 10 page document that has, quotes from the author and playwright. It has different imagery that we all really collected over time. So it really is a document created by the creative team and early in the process that we then published for everyone to view. That was a part of the process. And that was like the guiding document that, during tech, we would say, this moment just isn't feeling right. What do we think about this? And we would go back and be like, oh, this quote feels like this moment, or this image feels like this moment. And something that was really special about designing and teching this piece and producing it on stage is that every single aspect of the show really relies on the other, right? Like there is at no point a sound effect in this piece that is not married to a light cue, that is not married to movement or text or scenery shifting. So everything kind of works in tandem. And it truly does feel like a piece that as you watch it, it's just like one living organism that takes you from beginning to end. And it moves in a way that I think is different than a very much traditional theater that we're used to, lights up, lights down. But it moves in a way that it feels very a piece, if you will, with the performers on stage. And that was something we really wanted to push from the beginning, was this feeling of everything is connected. And throughout the preview process, we really have been reeling in and honing in on how to make that as clean and concise and crisp, if you will, as possible.
Yeah. I love how you talk about that. And because I'm a person who also talks with her hands, as you were saying that, you were doing this, like this pulsating move. And, a living organism that's pulsing, that's breathing, and also growing out and expanding. I think that's a really beautiful image for any story, but particularly for this, especially thinking about, it's at this point 52 years old, right? As a story that was originally written, and that it continues to kind of like grow and touch people, I think is really beautiful. And I'm just thinking of the dramaturgical packet that you mentioned. I've seen elements of that. And one of the things that was really cool was seeing how in the packet was, quotes, it wasn't just the Bluest Eye, but like there was a quote from the Beloved about rememory and how that works and how it's a living thing. And so the fact that you talk about this piece as a living thing, it's almost as if the piece itself is a bit of rememory, right? And like the mounting it and adapting it, displaying it in a new way. Like so far, the way I'm seeing how the packet itself is alive in the piece, which is really cool. Something that I'm wondering about is for you, and I feel like I may be asking a question that I sort of asked in another question, but I kind of wanted to be a little bit more explicit about it. Was there a particular entry point for you into this piece? Like beyond the what it would mean to produce it, to be a part of the production, was there anything else that kind of really drew you to it, or is it just this is an amazing thing to design and I can't possibly say no?
Yeah, I had not read the novel prior to working on this piece, and I had heard of it, but I had never actually sat down and looked into it. And it's funny, the script came across my desk. I say that even though it comes across my email, but it came across my desk, and I took a look at it, and I texted my mother, and I said, I just got an offer to design a production of Bluest Eye. And she immediately called me. She was like, that was one of my favorite novels growing up. Wonderful. And she's a Black woman from the South, so for her it resonated in a way that I think resonates with many people who read the story. And she was like, you have to work on this. This is such a wonderful opportunity. I love the piece. And she was telling about how the story had just had an anniversary, and she was telling me all this information that I eventually go and look up and figure out. And I was like, well, if it means this much to one person, then we need to do it. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, Selfishly so. Sometimes you do a show because you love it, right? Like if someone's going to
Right.
offer me Little Shop of Horrors, I love that show and I'm going to do it. And then sometimes you do a show because there's just one person who absolutely loves it. And I was like, even if every performance, only one person in the audience absolutely falls in love with it, then we're doing this justice. So that's really how I got interested in it. And then I kind of fell in love with the piece as we were working on it. And it was, really a wonderful piece. The tech process was wonderful. The energy in the room was amazing and extremely supportive. And it really felt like, I hate to quote Drumline, but they have this quote that goes, one band, one sound. And it really at times felt like we had one band and one sound going on. And the performers' energy that, would come to the designers and the designers' energy going back. There's really wonderful osmosis, if you will, in the space.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't know Drumline was going to make it into this conversation when we started, but I love it. A good line is a good line,
Right.
That's amazing. It, I guess, and this doesn't need to be specifically about the Bluest Eye, but I think, it obviously touches on it. When you're kind of working on a piece, when I work with students, for example, I work with students and we're doing performance because that's what I know. I'm a person who is an actor, so I can teach students how to act. And oftentimes I don't tell them to worry about the stuff that's going on around them, right? Like there will be sound, there'll be some lights, it'll do a thing. And I'm thinking about how, most people, they kind of know the thing is happening. You're sitting in the audience or maybe you're in the stage and you know it's happening. Like you see the lights change and there is an effect and you sort of feel it. If the piece is working, you're gonna go on the ride, right, with the piece. But I'm wondering, like, how do you talk to people or explain to people that lighting is just as much a storytelling process and practice as the words on the page or the movement that you see in the space, and that even if you don't see the subtleties of it, it's still quite powerful, like and important. How do you talk about that to folks?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's oh, that's such a good question. And I think it's a question I answer often, but it changes ever so slightly, kind of depending on the production. And in this piece, more than other productions, I would say the lighting of this production is similar to the underscoring of a film, right? A moment where something dramatic happens and that long violin pull happens and you start to tear up a little bit and you feel that movement kind of in your soul. That's very much how the lighting is in this piece. It's something that oftentimes is not the star of the show, right? So it sits right there with everything else that's happening, and you feel it kind of in the back of your mind more so than you do with the front of your eyes, right? So there are lots of moments in this show where Pecola or Mrs. Breedlove are tapping into a monologue, and the light shifts are so subtle and so kind of underscored into the piece that by the time we land in the cue exact, you don't even realize that it had happened, And there's a number of cues in the show that are easily 45 seconds to a minute and a half long that take place over a length of time, that grow like a sunrise, that crescendo with the music in such a way that it just happens, right? Like it just felt like it needed to happen. So it's a lot of that. There's not a whole lot of, hey, look over here moments in the piece, which we do occasionally when it calls out, but it's very much the audience is just kind of in the organism and you look where it kind of takes you. It's not a very much like, like Chicago where it's like, spot on, it's very much a underscored piece.
Yeah, that's I love that it's underscored, because it's another way of thinking about what the thing. I often talk to people and I say, how does a thing operate? What are its like the internal mechanisms of the piece? And underscore feels really, really perfect. When you're planning something, when you're designing something, do you find that language comes easily? Like did you know when you were reading the script for the Bluest Eye, for example, I think the lighting needs to underscore these moments? like when you go into that meeting with the way, is it like, you know, this is the tone that I want to do, or like this is how we underscore? Do you know what those verbs need to be, what that operating language needs to be in order for the story to like do its thing?
Yeah, I think for this production, it was a discovery process that over
Mm,
the creative process, the design process was discovered. For me personally, I often don't feel that exact moment, that exact uh, the energy, if you will, until I get
mm,
to the design run. Because in the design run, it's really the performers on stage giving it out to the room, you know,
yeah.
with bare essentials, right? Because they're just in their rehearsal attire and they're just performing, and you can see the emotion as raw as it ever will be. And that's kind of what I love about the designer run, because it's an
Mm,
opportunity to see where the other side of the creative team, right, like the performers and the choreographer and director, have created, you know, what we're going to be putting on stage. And I'm all about, at least in my um, design being, supporting what's on stage. You know, there's kind of two ways to look at design. You can say, this is like what's on the page, and we're going to put this on stage because this is the energy that was written by Lydia, right?
right.
Or there's the chance to look at what energy is radiating off the stage and match it. And I'm all about matching the energy, because it'll always feel correct in a way that feels right. And I talk about your soul a lot, but when you're watching it, you're just like, oh, well, that feels good, right? Whereas
Yeah.
when you kind of force a design on top of something, you're like, well, this is kind of uncomfortable. And we've all sat in a show where it's like they design led this moment of acting. And I often
Hmm.
like to believe that the acting can lead the design in a way that'll be more fruitful and help clarify story beats than just being like, look at this cool crack in the floor that lights up, right? So
Yeah.
there's a way to kind of marry that and make it feel right. You know, and that usually you feel it in the design run, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I really like that. And again, like you said, you know, with this piece, like the lighting is underscoring. You know, I remember being told very clearly by a director once, you never follow the piano follows you. Like when you're singing. And so like, so
Mm.
I fully hear that. That's great. Um, I think I may be at my last question. Oh no, I'm not. I actually I do have one other thing that I wanted to ask about. Do you find when you're, and this is just a very like technical question, because I'm like in space with theater people, like, you know, we use shorthand, we kind of know what we're talking about when like, you know, we say a certain thing, or at least I think I know what I'm talking about when I say a certain thing. Do you do you find that like when you're trying to explain what lighting design can do, or how technical design, like you said, can match and uplift and really I don't want to say accentuate, because I think you were saying more than that, the acting that's happening on stage, do you discuss it differently with people who are not practitioners, or do you feel
Hmm.
like this is actually language, and if not language, at least kind of like a mode that is actually accessible to them? Because if you sit in a theater, like you said, it feels good. Like, do you find that you can like have talk to them about it in a way that they get, um or do you use different sorts of ways of explaining it?
I I I think I probably talk to audience members and practitioners probably the same. I tend to
Mm.
talk about lighting via emotion. Like even if we're
Ah,
talking about something being evocative of place and time, I'm usually talking about like what is that feeling of 5 o'clock, you know, sunset,
yeah.
right? Like it feels warm and it kind of feels inviting and loving, right? And I tend to use descriptive words like that. And
Mm.
sometimes, you know, because we are very visual artists on the design end, I do run out of, you know, words. And it's funny because when I do, I often go, I need to marinate on that for a second and then get back to you, because I'm searching for the word to best describe what the thing is. And I
Yeah.
often find when talking about lighting more in the abstract with emotion, you actually get to literally like the heart of what you're trying to get out of the design,
Mm.
better than say finding a research image. And I often find research images unless they have the tone you're looking for, can be misleading, right? Because it could be a
Right.
beautiful photo of a tree, but unless that tone is right, then it's going to mess up the whole kind of design process and the conversation with others around you. So really relying on what, again, I talk about my soul, but what the descriptive words that come out of it feel in that moment, you know?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I asked that question because I think, again, because I work with not necessarily people who are in theater. They're like either coming from it like non-back art backgrounds at all. So like whenever I try to like explain things, I'm like, what are the words that I can use? Because I'm just in it all the time, that I'm fully immersed. And I find that, how we talk about a thing, right, is how will draw folks to it. And so how do we kind of like, use language that is welcoming and accessible to them without necessarily like, kind of giving up on the thing that we love the most. And I find, and honestly, I'm even hearing it in this conversation, the way you talk about the design and the way you talk about how you engage with the work, it really does feel quite, if not personal, at least something that's kind of organic and of you and from you, as opposed to this conceptual thing that's happening or over here. And I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you. And this is my last question. And it's kind of, I don't think it's silly, but is there a type of project you like working on more than others? I mean, it sounds like you've loved working on this, but you did say Little Shop of Horrors. And I do love Little Shop as well. So are you like more into like doing musicals, or is it the piece itself that's important? What's the thing?
I think the short and funny answer is it's whatever project I'm not working on. So I'm doing now, so I'm craving a musical, right? But my next project is a musical, and I'll be craving a play, And it's amazing because my schedule and my calendar actually balances itself out, because I'll usually do a play, a musical, play, a musical. It just happens that way. I really don't sit down and go to my agent and be like, I have to do 10 plays and 10 musicals a year. It just happened to be that way. I find for my aesthetic, specifically as a designer, I tend to work on, the Bluest Eye. And then my musicals tend to be things like, an example I did in New York, Carmen Jones, which are shows that aren't necessarily flashy. It's shows that have a little more, it's not a thought out design. It's more they're more like plays with singing. That's how I like to think of them. So a lot of the musicals I work on are very much so like a very play-esque musical, right? So there will be a lot of really serious book scenes, and they'll happen to be singing in the scene. Fun Home was one of my favorite shows to work on. So, and arguably Fun Home really is a play that happens to have music in it. So I tend to work on that kind of stuff. I love a large kind of obnoxious show like Moulin Rouge. I love to watch them. I think working on them is a little different. It's just not the same, and it's not my aesthetic, if you will. It's not what I'm super interested in. And I also love taking old shows and kind of reviving them and reinventing them. So I recently worked on one of my favorite productions I've ever worked on, The Amen Corner by James Baldwin down at Shakespeare Theater Company. And we kind of reinvented what that show looks and feels and sounds like. And that was a really kind of riveting process to take a work that's lesser known, but a classic to say the least, and bring it into new light. So that's always really exciting.
I love that. Oh, I would have loved to have seen the Amen Corn actually. Like you said, plays like that are lesser known, but like are classics and kind of really quite, I don't want to say specific, but hold a place, an important place, and getting a chance to like reinvent it and reintroduce it. Sounds like super, like so much fun. Amazing. I really thought for a second there you were going to say that, Little Shop, I want to do Little Shop all the time, because when you say, you get so excited when you sing it. But no, I love that. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. This was really a really fun conversation to have. And I'm so excited about the work that you've done on this production. It's gorgeous. So yay.
Thank you so much for having me. And this was a great afternoon of chatting.
Yeah.
So I'd love to do it again sometime. Hopefully the Huntington
we'd love
back.
I mean, I would imagine you will be. If you're not back, I will ask questions.